Hello and welcome to another Source Gaming discussion. I'm your host Nantendrix and joining me is Triss.
Hello.
And the two of us are here to give our second Hyrule Warriors discussion. I guess it's our third one, but the part two of the series we were doing. So the first one we did was on characters, and I just wanted to bring this up front. We recorded it after TGS happened, and then Smash, Steve, all that got in the way. So by the time the video actually got done, Nintendo had, out of nowhere, dropped two more... dropped a full trailer and a whole gameplay demonstration from Treehouse that kind of confirmed, deconfirmed some of our theories that we talked about in that. Yeah, just a bit.
Just a little.
So, oh well. We're gonna make sure this doesn't happen this time. I'm sure Nintendo won't do Hyrule Warriors twice, or in 2 weeks back to back. So hopefully this one should be fine. But however, the Treehouse stream in particular was a pretty good one to have before this discussion, as it gave us a view of the world map and the menus and hints at various locations throughout the game. And the whole point of this discussion is going to be on those locations and the scenarios and the story and how the game is going to play out like that. So, yeah. We've got a list of all the locations, mix of confirmed, hinted, and possible locations that we wanted to go through. And, yeah, I suppose the first point then is to bring up the 7 stages that have been confirmed. And I'll just run through these, and I'll run through the ones we've actually seen footage of now. Hyrule Field, which has had a full gameplay at TGS and was in the first trailer. Garuda Desert, which was in the Treehouse one. Zora's Domain, which I don't think we've seen like a full playthrough of, but it was in like the initial trailer, right?
Yeah, it was in a couple trailers and some screenshots.
Yeah. Then Death Mountain we saw a full playthrough of on Famitsu's one where they showed off Daruk. Rito Village and Tabantha Frontier, which I think personally is one map, is we haven't seen a scenario for, but is confirmed to be a location thanks to the Treehouse stream. Hyrule Ridge, we saw a scenario for in the Famitsu one, where they showed off Impa. And then Great Plateau, we haven't seen anything of, but thanks to the Treehouse stream, we know it was the next mission she had going. Because if you look on the map that they showed off, you can tell all the playable missions are the diamond-shaped locations. The blue diamond-shaped locations, with the small orange ones being the sub-missions, like where Link fights at Lon Lon Ranch.
It's definitely clear how they break them up, which is kind of nice. I'm hoping this map doesn't end up looking as cluttered as Breath of the Wild with all 120 plus shrines in the end. But
yeah, that's true. I don't think all the shrines will be there, or the Korok seeds, which you also know are in the game.
That's
true. Because that doesn't make sense. But you were saying this before we started recording, Triss. That some of the places on the map don't actually line up with where you actually fight in the game.
Yeah, so, for example, in the Treehouse livestream, we see a training mission for Link for two-handed weapons, and on the map, that's kind of close to, like, Whistling Hill. It's in more of, like, the southeastern part of Central Hyrule, but the actual gameplay scenario tosses him into Lon Lon Ranch, right outside Mabe Village.
Yeah, which, by the way, is really cool how it sort of lines up really nicely with the Ocarina of Time one, in terms of the buildings and stuff, although, judging by their placement on the map, you can't actually go anywhere beyond that. That's like the border of it all. But still, It's a nice reference, because I really wanted to see Lon Lon Ranch in its quote-unquote prime before the Calamity. Although Link's training mission makes me think it wasn't the Calamity that destroyed the ranch, it was definitely
It was Link going Popeye that did.
Yeah, Talon's just sitting there in his building, just like, what have I done? Why did I let them train here?
So I think in addition to, since we were talking a bit about the map, what's interesting too is the map isn't actually broken up in the same way it was in Breath of the Wild. So like the idea of Central Hyrule is not the same breakup for Central Hyrule we saw in Breath of the Wild. For example, the Great Plateau is included, as opposed to being an entirely separate area.
Yeah, I had a thought about that, because the Great Plateau's obviously always been really strange, considering how high its elevation is. And I'm assuming that must be some sort of Sheikah power, so I'm wondering if we'll actually get to see that happen in the game. Like, when they put Link there to rest towards the end of the game, Impa, Pura, Robbie, whatever, does something that causes the whole plateau to basically just rise up to keep Link safe.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, and so all of the bokoblins and stuff that we found up there have just been trapped there, basically, for 100 years. But that's why no really dangerous enemies ever got up there, and...
outside of a couple Guardians that were already there.
Yeah, that were broken and just stuck there.
Mm-hmm. No, that could definitely be the case. I think it's definitely interesting to see the way it's broken up, because I don't think it's broken up in terms of, oh, there's one map per area. No. But, in the, excuse me, in the original Hyrule Warriors, there were like they weren't terribly big, but you had the maps, and then when you did submissions in adventure mode, they would actually like limit the size of the map. They would close off a bunch of gates, and they would kind of restrict the size of it. And I almost feel like that's what a lot of this would end up being, because where we see, take for example the training mission with Link again in Long Long Ranch, that area is like the eastmost section of the map that we saw from Tokyo Game Show, which was still part of Hyrule Field.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like a lot of these things, if you laid the maps out together, would match up, but they're cut off in a way where you can't actually go the entire, you can't go to the entirety of Central Hyrule in one single gameplay map. Yeah. But you can see elements of the map cut off, so to say.
Have gates blocking your path and things like that. Probably just gates or like wagons or something.
For some reason you can't go to those sections, but I think if you pieced it all together, technically in terms of like, I guess, a level design model, they would all be on one map in Central Hyrule. Not always accessible to each other.
Yeah, no, I think that's the case as well. And something I think it's unlike in the first Hyrule Warriors, where you weren't quite sure what section of the map is going to be blocked off when you go into a mission. I have a feeling that, one, they're not going to line up directly. Their vague locations are where they're going to be on the map. So this one, one that ends up in Lon Lon Ranch, was on Whispering Hill, is it called?
I believe so. It was near that.
Yeah, it's just south of there. So, like, any missions on that side might just be blocked off on Lon Lon Ranch, whereas, say, if the Colosseum isn't a location and it's just...
Whistling Hill, that's what it is.
Whistling Hill. So if it's if the Colosseum is just a location, maybe, but if it's got a mission there, maybe when you go on there, it will warp you to Mabe Village or whatever that's right next to it. Not Mabe Village, the other one, the outpost one that's down in the south.
Oh, the exchange region?
Yes, that's
the exchange ruins? Or,
yeah, because that's the closest place to the Colosseum. So I could see that happening, which gives the players some sort of idea of what area for the map they'll be running in before they pick the mission, which is kind of nice. So let's talk about these levels then that we have seen first, if we have any comments for them at all. I feel like for Hyrule Field, we've probably seen enough of it, and the most significant part of it was probably Lon Lon Ranch, in my opinion.
I think I'm genuinely curious, just in the Tokyo Game Show footage, where exactly Link was when he was at the southmost part of it. Because it's been kind of debated if he's in, like, just outside the Great Plateau, in the, I think it's called, like, the Gatepost Town, or if he's only as far south as the Exchange. We know Hyrule Garrison is where the Central Tower comes out from, but it's hard to tell because it doesn't quite match up 1-to-1 with Breath of the Wild in terms of scaling. So it's hard to tell exactly how far south it goes. Yeah,
I think when I looked at this, when I was trying to figure it out, I had summarized that at the end it ends up right above Lake Colombo. Which is like, so the Exchange Ruins are a bit northwest of that, but I think the Exchange Ruins are actually, like, the actual Exchange Town might actually be bigger than what the ruins suggest.
Yeah.
So I think they stretch down a bit further south and sort of stop there, and then it doesn't go any more south than that. The weird thing about it is it doesn't quite match up, like you said. Like, when Link sort of leaves the Exchange from the east, there's a bridge that seems to go over something. Like, there isn't actually any river or anything there if you're actually judging it by Breath of the Wild size. So they've either really extended out Lake Colomo, or they've added a river in that didn't exist before, or that bridge just goes over a dip in the ground for some reason.
Well, actually, I'm going to use this to transition to something with the idea of really changing up the geography a bit, potentially. Hyrule Ridge, or more specifically what we saw from the Game Live Japan footage, the Breach of Demise is massive now. Like, in Breath of the Wild, that's like 2 paths. That's like a Y-shaped path that you can run through in a straight line. But now it's like an entire section that looks kind of complex, actually.
Yeah, it's a weird one, that, because you could sort of excuse a river drying up or something like that over a 100-year period. But an entire ridge mountain range completely reforming is a bit strange. It's a bit strange.
I like it better in Age of Calamity for what we saw, because it makes a little bit more sense. If you're going to call something the Breach of Demise, make it look kind of terrifying. Yeah. Filled with monsters and twists and turns, and make it feel like a scary canyon. But like, I'm really curious how much of that area really is Hyrule Ridge versus how much of it is simply the Breach of Demise.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was wondering whether it would go all the way down to Thundra Plateau or Ludvu's Bog, like, because those are significant locations in that area.
Because we know in that area they're trying to reach the Royal Ancient Lab, but which is like just north of the Breach of Demise. So it's curious, but that's the big one to me that had like a big change in its geography. So it really makes me curious any other areas in Breath of the Wild that might be getting that.
Yeah, no, I'm interested to see, because I that's the area that I know the least about of the ones that, because it's not exactly the most significant area in the game.
Exactly.
But it sort of makes sense to be playable with the Royal Ancient Lab nearby. But so I'm wondering whether or not there's actually, like, they've just dug some caves in or something to sort of give it a layer, or whether the Breach of Demise has actually been really shrunk down and the whole area actually goes really far to the west. Maybe the path north to the Ancient Labs is blocked off or something. So you have to go around Ludvu's Bog, Thunder Plateau, or whatever, or through some cave systems to actually get there. Because otherwise, I'm assuming you start on Karok Bridge, because that's the closest place to Hyrule. Yeah. It's just then, and it's not that far of a journey to get to the Ancient Lab ruins.
Right.
To make a whole mission out of. But yeah, no, that's I'm very curious to see the layout of that. Another stage that is actually surprisingly big, much bigger than I was expecting, is the Gerudo Desert.
Yeah.
It's big. Like, I sort of suspected you would have Gerudo Town, and you'd have the merchant stop that's just a bit further down the pathway. And then there are those ruins slightly north. Although, judging from the actual map layout, it doesn't seem like you actually can go in those ruins. Those ruins seem to be used as like a blockade.
Yeah.
Split the map into 2 sections. But it seems like from the final... I thought it was just going to be that and then maybe some rocky areas at the top. But it seems like from that, you can potentially go all the way up to the Yiga clan base.
Yeah, I mean, considering the mission for that one that we saw was to defeat Master Koga, somehow. It looks like you have a vast majority of the desert, with the furthest out into the desert, I guess, so to say, would be Gerudo Town. Yes. And then it goes from Gerudo Town all the way out to the cliffs near the entrance to the desert. And that's expansive.
Yeah, it goes up towards, like, the start of Gerudo Highlands, basically, but it is really big. I know the Gerudo Desert's always been a big location in basically every Zelda game, but it's much bigger than I was expecting, and it makes you wonder if this is another one where it's going to be scaled back significantly, like the actual trip to get to the Yiga clan base is going to be significantly faster than it was in Breath of the Wild.
That's true. I think the Gerudo Desert actually shows us something else that's really interesting, which obviously that may not be the case for every level, but from what we see of it, there's only like 3, maybe 4 keeps in that whole map, and they're all in like the north and east sections.
You don't think Gerudo Town is a keep itself?
It's not marked like one. It could be one, but it's not, it isn't marked like one. And I think that makes this really interesting because it's not like the original Hyrule Warriors, which is very focused on the idea of, take the keep, get the captains kind of thing. It's not like that in this case. I mean, there were more in, I think, the Hyrule Field map, but to look at this in this entire big map of Gerudo Desert and only see 3, maybe 4 keeps is actually genuinely surprising. And I think it speaks volumes to the level design.
Yeah, and especially if they're all on one side, it's an interesting thing. Although I feel like that surely can't be the case. Maybe the keeps just haven't activated or something. Because I remember we talked about it with Hyrule Field in an earlier discussion, that I was impressed that the keeps weren't just squares splotted around the map. They actually seem to have some form that fit in with where they were. So potentially there could be a random keep location somewhere in the sort of cliffside mountain area that we just can't tell from looking at the map, but once you get there you'll see it's potentially like got borders up or something like that. The eager put some barricades up and that makes it a keep. But
yeah, that would make sense, because we've always had levels in Hyrule Warriors where sometimes not all the keeps were activated. It was very obvious where it would go, but still. I think another big point to bring up with Gerudo Town, though, is the fact that they really went the extra mile with this level design. Like, you can go in the buildings. I don't know why you would enter the bar when nobody's there, but you can go in. And that's incredible.
Link just needs a drink to freshen up.
I think what's nice is it's such a contrast to what we had for the original Hyrule Warriors, where the levels were more so just, oh, here you go, here's Lake Hylia. It just kind of looks like it, but we've shoved this whole battlefield across all of it.
Yeah, remember how close Zora's Domain and Lake Hylia were, guys? Yeah. You could practically jump from one to the other.
It's just really nice to see this level of accuracy.
Yeah, no, this is, if there's any evidence that they've just taken the map already existing for Breath of the Wild and then squished and squashed it until it fit, it would be this. Like, the fact that, because all the rooms are modern, it's like, yeah, well, why not just have Link go in them, It's no reason to block them off, I guess, like... So that is pretty cool, but you're right, I don't know why you would. Maybe there were some special scenarios or missions or something where you have to find, like, 6 hidden enemies in Gerudo Town or something under a time limit, and they're like hidden inside buildings and stuff. That could be a good one.
I'm just fascinated by the fact that they didn't just have like an invisible wall at the stairs. That Urbosa actually went up the stairs and went inside. That was insane. It's the little details that count.
Yeah, I wonder how many other level games should be able to do that in. If you'll actually be able to go into the lab, the actual Hylian lab, or if there's a mission in Hatano, can you go into Hatano Village? And go
or even the Hyrule Castle town.
Yeah, Hyrule Castle town, or even the Great Plateau. Can you go into the Temple of Time?
Oh, true.
Fighting there, maybe that's counts as a fort or something. Let's move down further on the list then. So Zora's Domain, we haven't really seen much of it, but I remember discussing in a previous discussion saying how it seems they've they've removed a mountain. Sorry.
Yeah, for some reason, one of the mountains is just missing from the... we saw in, like, I think it was the second trailer, there's Mifa gameplay, and there's, like, a couple mountains that you can see from the exact location of Zora's Domain. They're just missing. Yeah,
the one, specifically, I think it's the one where Varuto ends up standing on once you've done that dungeon, is just not there. Like, at all. And I remember commenting that a lot of that area you have to scale waterfalls to reach the high areas, and obviously you won't be able to do that in this one, so I feel like they've just sort of flattened the mountainous area around it a bit to make it scalable for everybody.
Right.
So that's Zora's Domain. I don't think there's much because we haven't really seen proper gameplay footage. And Death's Mountain we have, but I don't necessarily think there's anything massively interesting to talk about there. You go into Goron City, you can go all the way up to Death Mountain. I think its location on the map is more interesting, like the actual marker itself you click on to start the mission is like right on top of Death Mountain.
Well, I think that speaks volumes to just how much of it you cross. I really liked seeing how accurate the Goron City was. It made me curious now if you can actually go inside those buildings, and they just chose not to. But I really did like seeing that. But what was interesting was, having tried to do comparison footage, it's hard to match up the rest of it, where like Daruk and Impa were. It's hard to match that up with actual parts of Death Mountain. But where Link was, you can almost match his entire route.
I remember when I was trying to figure out how I thought the map for Death Mountain would look before they actually showed off the map. I was looking at the map of Breath of the Wild, trying to figure out how you could form this to actually make a conceivable Warriors map.
Right.
Because some areas, like the Gerudo Canyon, for example, which isn't confirmed to be a level, is literally like as just an S-shaped straight line, which isn't exactly the most interesting of a map.
I think the Gerudo Canyon actually might be like the top rightmost part of the Gerudo map, looking at that map.
You think? Because I mean, it is northeast.
It looks a little like small and winding over there.
I mean, it could just be like a pathway around, because above north of where that merchant town is in merchant post is, there's all of these rocky sort of canyons and winding paths, and there's like a shrine right in the middle of it. That's what I was thinking that is. I think the far eastern border of Garuda Desert will be that gate that blocks it off from
that makes sense.
Gerudo Canyon Pass. But yeah, like, so because of that, the Death Mountain is also kind of just a sort of weird C shape with a little sprong coming off of it. So I figured they might have to make tunnels or make new paths down the mountain that sort of wrap around, so that Link doesn't have to go through Goron Village to reach the peak of Death Mountain. He can just do it from the Goron Canyon or whatever it's called down at the bottom, Elden Canyon. So I feel like they've sort of tweaked it like that so that there's easier pathways to get up and down. But yeah, other than that, I don't think there's massive amounts for Death Mountain that I think really stood out.
Yeah, Death Mountain's one of those areas where I think it would only really have one map.
Yeah.
Or the Elden region in general. Like, I don't really think we'll have multiple maps set there, to be honest.
Yeah, no, because we know that certain regions will have multiple maps, because we know for a fact Hyrule Field has... Central Hyrule has 3, so... But yeah, I agree. I don't think Elden will get another map. I think that one's probably set. But one that I at least wasn't sure about was the Hebra region. With we know that Rito Village is there, and judging from the location of side quests, it seems to stretch down to Tabantha Frontier because there's a side quest there. However, like we were talking about earlier in Hyrule Field, the side quest locations don't have to match up one-to-one with where they are. But I think that kind of makes sense to have Tabantha Frontier as a part of this, like Strock Lake and Kuhu Mountain, because otherwise I feel like the Rito Village map is just going to be a big circle with nothing
and especially
interesting.
When we look at scaling for what they did in other villages in Central Hyrule and Gerudo Town, Rito Village and the circle around it isn't enough for one map.
Yeah.
It really isn't. I mean, it would be certainly an interesting shaped map, but I think they're going to need to stretch a little bit in each direction.
Yeah, and I think, it's the question of
It'll probably
how far
include the flight range, for example.
Yeah, well, I think the flight range is in the game, because I think that's the scene where we see Rivali and Link first meet, where Rivali jumps behind him. I think that's going to be a fort, and you might even have a Rivali boss fight there. Probably. When you first meet, because I feel like, we were talking about before, who do you fight with, like, generals, and it seems like Zora's Domain, you might fight a Lionel. In Elden, it will be one of them rock monsters. And Gerudo Valley seems to be Koga. But in the Tabantha region, Rito Village, I feel like Rivali himself is probably going to be the boss fight.
You have to win him over to your side by proving your strength.
Basically, yeah. He's got that sort of personality. I think that would work.
Yeah.
But it just means that you're fighting a bunch of Rito, potentially, instead of monsters.
Oh, jeez.
For that battle, which would be interesting, because we've only really seen monsters and Hylian soldiers that you fight. Did we see Gorons? Were there Gorons fighting in Goron Village?
Yeah, there were Gorons fighting in Goron Village.
Okay, and we have seen Gerudo, actually, so you probably will see Rito warriors and Zora warriors fighting as well.
We do see Zora warriors in cutscenes from some of the trailers, but so it seems like we'll have some soldiers of every race, which is actually pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I wonder if we'll get the same for Koroks in the woods. Maybe not. That might be. Considering there are Korok seeds, they might not fight, but you never know.
I think that would make trying to find the Korok seeds a lot more difficult. Maybe you'll just defend it from an entire army of Deku scrubs.
This is why there are no Deku. This is why there are no Kokairi in Breath of the Wild. Link destroyed them all. But yeah, the Rito Village area, I wonder how either far south towards the Tabara region it goes. Does it go all the way down to Nero Hill? Because there's a tower there, and there's also the ancient columns where we had that memory with Link and Zelda.
Right.
Like, could it go all the way down there, or will it in fact go up north into the Hebra region? Because the Hebra region is a unique area, like the big snowy mountain, but we haven't really seen anything in footage that would imply you'd ever go there.
The closest we've seen is like the flight range.
Yeah, the closest we've seen is the flight range. But that like leaves a massive... It's obviously still on the map, so there are probably side quests and things you can get at there. So I wonder if there will be a map there or not.
One
or
of
if
the
it will
springs
always
isn't
default
there,
down.
right?
There's a hot spring in there, but I don't think one of the main springs is in there.
Because I know... I'm trying to remember the exact locations of all the springs. I think the Spring of Power is in Akala. The Spring of Courage... Where is the Spring of Courage?
Spring of Courage is in Farron Woods.
Right, that's in Farron Woods. That's in the ruins. At the end of like the serpent.
Yeah, and the Wisdom one is on Lanayru.
Yeah, Wisdom is Mount Lanayru, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
they're all on the... That's what I mean, like... Breath of the Wild has a weird problem where a lot of its key locations are either in the center or in the northeast and southwest. Like the Farron region and the Farron region is basically... You have no reason to ever go there.
Well, at least we now know there is a reason to go to the Farron region because of
for this game,
the Spring of Courage. They need to.
But the Hebra region as well also has no actual reason to go there. And the Tabantha region as well.
That's going to be an interesting one. I feel like the mountains might be a bit much for them. They might do the Tabantha Tundra, but I don't know if they would go all the way out to the Hebra Mountains. There may not be anything worth them going for over there.
There's the snowboarding slide that goes down there.
Yes. Practicing Link's shield surfing.
Yeah, exactly. I could see them combining the Tabantha Tundra and like the east side of Hebra. You know, because there's an area where there's like a bunch of rock, like really tall, weird rock structures that you can run under, and then there's also that area where you push the snowboard down the hill and to try and crack the entrance to the shrine. I could see both like them potentially being one part of the map, and then the Tundra snowfield being another part of the map.
I can see that.
Side. Just to have a snowy map, because it's it's a unique sort of setting, and also to give the north of Hyrule something to do.
Yeah, really.
But yeah, that's the Rito Village and the Panther Frontier, and then the last one is, which we haven't seen any footage of, is the Great Plateau, which seemed to be the next mission that they had to do at Treehouse, because it was big flashing orange diamond. Yeah,
I think the big cause I'm looking at right now. It's just in front of the Great Plateau. It's down, lining up perfectly with Gatepost Town.
Yeah.
So I think it will include the Great Plateau, but I think majority of the map will be the Great Plateau, and then also the Gatepost Town, Outpost Ruins, East Post Ruins. Like, it'll have that kind of path out, down around it as well, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. To Scout Hill, maybe all the way to the Bridge of Hylia, with Lake Hylia and being where it stops. Because if I'm right, and the Great Plateau is actually the same size as the same plane as everything else, then you could enter the Great Plateau from the Eastern Abbey, or obviously Gatepost Town, and things and stuff like that, in the Temple of Time. So I could see that. I could see it going potentially up. It depends. It's going to be big. It depends if it goes all the way up to Mount Hylia, or if it stops at the River of the Dead or whatever.
That's true. It might stop at the River of the Dead, but it really depends on how much they end up making use of it. They'll at minimum need to reach the Shrine of Resurrection for later in the game.
Yeah, and I think the Great Plateau is such a classic location from Breath of the Wild, because it's the first one you start at, that I feel like even if we didn't have it confirmed now, I would be 100% guaranteed that it would have been a map in this. So yeah, I'm interested to see how it's laid out, see if you're right, if it includes basically southern Hyrule it is part of it as well, or if they just do Gatepost Town and then the Great Plateau all as one big map. But those are all the stages we know, but that's not all the stages that have been implied to at least be in the game. There's actually another 5 levels that have potential hints at being playable, and we'll start with the 2 that we've actually seen gameplay of. So I mean, I think they're the strongest hints.
Oh, yes.
And that's the Akala Highlands and the Nero Promenade. So with the Akala Highlands, we've actually only seen the Akala Citadel, which sort of borders the Highlands and the Elden region. But I believe you were the one who mentioned this to me. This is where Hyrule's last stand happens, according to the lore of the game.
Yes, the Akala Citadel is where basically all the soldiers that flee Hyrule Castle when Calamity Ganon comes up, that's where they go. That's where the last stand happens. And we've seen now the Akala Citadel in 3 trailers. We see Daruk there fighting a Hinox in the very first trailer, just outside of it. The second trailer literally opens with it burning, which was with like the sound of Zelda crying. So that's like a really deep mood setter right there.
Yeah.
And then the third trailer where it had like Robbie and Proto, we see Robbie standing on like one of the towers of Akala Citadel with some soldiers, which is really interesting actually.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see like what order you go to in this, because if it's the last stand of the people of Hyrule after Calamity Ganon, would this presumably be after all the champions have died? Because if that's the case, then Daruk couldn't be there for his thing. I mean, obviously it could be a side quest or whatever. So do you go to Akala Citadel before the Calamity Ganon shows up? Like, do you go there earlier in the game to stop a threat?
So I believe what's been established is, while the entire Calamity took place on What Night and such, since all the champions started in the Nero Promenade, they had to still get to their divine beasts.
Yes.
And we know that though the king's story implies that the guardians got taken over and the champions lost their lives all around the same time, I think technically it's like 2 phases, because I think all the guardians attack first, because we've seen some gameplay footage some of the champions fighting guardians, and while I'm sure some of them go like amok sometimes and some of them go haywire, I have a feeling they'll probably have a proper fight against them. We know from the second trailer, there's this really beautiful shot of Urbosa on top of Vodna Boris, and she's overlooking Hyrule Field, like filled with guardians. But she's still on top of Vodna Boris, so she hasn't lost yet. That might actually be something Daruk does. He might help out at the Citadel on his way to Death Mountain. Maybe he like takes like a small detour to go over there and help them.
Maybe. That could be a good way to have the player see the last stand of thingy, because you'd have to assume that all the champions rush over to their nearest location. With Link and Zelda and Impa presumably heading towards Hyrule Castle itself. So it would be a good way to show us the Akala Citadel stuff if you get to control Daruk and he goes and sees it on his way there and it's like, because he's a good guy, let me go and try and help them out somehow.
Right.
Before then having to retreat to actually go back to Death Mountain. So
that's
definitely
tragic.
Possible. Yeah, absolutely. But on terms of maps, I'm wondering how far into the Akala Highlands this map will go, because every time we've seen it's been the Akala Citadel. So will the map just be that small area around the Citadel with the Akala Span and the Parade Ground ruins and stuff? Could it go all the way down to Akala 4th, South Akala, and all the way to where Tarrytown will end up being? Or will it take a different route and go more north to the Tauren Wetland, which we know is filled with guardians and stuff, and there's the mountain range, but then that's slightly awkward. And will it ever go far enough to go into the Deep Akala, because that's where the Spring of Power is, in Deep Akala?
I think it would have to, because of the Spring of Power. What I find interesting... Yeah, that is a big region. What I find interesting is on the map that we see, there's this weird like radar icon where I think it roughly lines up with where the Akala Research Lab is eventually made, but Robbie shouldn't be there yet. So
true.
I'm not sure why that's there, but
I mean, potentially, because considering the only times we've seen Robbie have been in the Hylian Research Lab and in Akala, it might just be that he goes there at some point to set something up, or him and Purah just have their own labs anyway. in the different region, and they work at that one, but they've got their own private studies on the other side of the map for some reason. But you're right, that is a weird location. I'm also wondering what it even means.
Yeah.
And it's the same for that little guardian in the Elden region. What does that mean? It's strange.
It's definitely curious, but I do think at minimum the areas that have the springs will definitely be maps. We know Zelda has to visit all of them, so
yeah,
it would be weird to only have it be a cutscene where they go there. Like you, especially the one in Farron, because that's dangerous. That has all like the Lizelfos though all around. I would imagine you have to basically protect Zelda all the way up to the point of getting to the spring.
Yeah, I think that would make sense, and I think that's good. Like, we haven't seen anything of Farron yet, Farron Woods, Farron Grasslands.
Yep.
But I think that's a unique location. It's also, like, the only location in Farron that has any significance. Like, we haven't seen a single map in that region yet, whereas all the others, we can sort of point out one or two that could potentially be there. But that would be a good reason. That would be a good excuse to have a map down there and have a reason to go there. With the Spring of Power, it makes me wonder whether or not Akala will have two maps, whether it'll have the Akala Highlands and Deep Akala, and maybe the Deep Akala one can go all the way from Skull Lake and to Melia Heights to the Spring of Power, or whether or not it's and then the Akala Citadel can either be around the Tauren Wetland or potentially even go more westward to like the Moor of Death Mountain and the lake there, potentially, or will it just be one big Akala map?
I think what's most interesting, to me at least, about the idea behind the Akala map is how, I guess, important the Akala region actually is to Hyrule, despite, like, how easy it may be to overlook that. And it really makes me curious just how expansive it'll end up being. Because there's so much there, but there's also so much nothing. So, I wonder if it would get scaled down, kind of like what we saw with Central Hyrule.
Yeah, that's possibly. If they're going to do the whole of Akala, I feel like it has to be scaled down because otherwise the map would be way too big. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how they scale it down. I think that's one of the things I'm kind of morbidly curious about. How are they going to squish these areas that we can run around and play in Breath of the Wild to fit a Warriors map? Like, is it going to feel weird when we're running down one area and get there in like 5 seconds and then go back to Breath of the Wild and it takes like 5 minutes to reach there instead?
Link got a lot slower after that long nap.
He was sleeping for a while, man. His muscles were very degenerated. But yeah, so that's one region. The other one is Nero Promenade, which you mentioned earlier, is where all of the champions and Zelda are when the Calamity happens.
Right.
That's where we get that thing. And we've seen one scene, I think, where Mipha is fighting some people like right at the entrance to it. So my assumption would be that this map takes up all of the Nero Promenade section, which in the Breath of the Wild is basically like a big river, but there's signs that there was meant to be bridges and structures there, and those have all just broken and fallen apart over time. So I would imagine the water probably doesn't get in the way. It's probably all fixed and perfectly okay in this one. What I'm curious about with this map is how much of Mount Lanayru it will take up, and if it will go all the way to Kakariko Village or not.
That's true. I think having Kakariko Village as like the starting point for it would be really interesting. And if it goes out to the top of Mount Lanayru, that'll be a rather straightforward map.
Yeah,
but
that's
more of a straightforward area because it's basically the Lanayru Promenade is basically a canyon. So
yeah, it pretty much is. Yeah. That's the only thing that sort of gets in the way of that idea, because it would be basically a straight, unless they gave that bit of field north of it and somehow wrapped it round so you could take a path there all the way back to the base of Mount Lanayru. Because I don't think you'd climb Mount Lanayru. I think that would be just the base of it where they see the Calamity would be one other side of it, of the map. But like, yeah, unless they wrap that round, it's going to be it's going to be like a T, essentially. A T with a little thing coming out towards the lower part of it. Which isn't the most exciting layout, but it's one that makes sense.
They might be able to make up for less exciting layouts with more exciting enemies.
Yeah, they could also just pull a Hyrule Ridge and disregard the actual like just cut down some mountains here and there and make pathways through that don't exist.
We're gonna have a really nice, clean pathway up Mount Lanayru. This is the blessing of Naydra.
Yeah, it's actually not Mount Lanayru. It's just the Mound Lanayru. It's actually not. Just misspelt it. It's not that high. Yeah, but that's another confirmed area.
You also mentioned the from the tinted list. We went to Akala Highlands and Nero Promenade, but we skipped the Great Hyrule Forest.
Yes, because the Great Hyrule Forest, we've only seen one cutscene there, and that's when all of the champions go and see the Deku Tree, and the forest ain't looking so mystical in that footage, I must say. But I almost wonder if that's maybe how they can get in there. Like, because obviously we in Breath of the Wild, the only hints of people we got that went there were Link and Zelda.
Yeah.
And you can explain why those two in particular can get there, being the princess and Link just being the special hero. But in this one, it shows that they can all go there. Yeah. So I guess the Deku Tree turned off his security system so that people could get through the Lost Woods this time.
Maybe. I think that map actually might include like the whole entrance area, which further so like what is it, the Minshi Woods, yeah. It might include Minshi Woods and the military training camp, like just south of it.
Yeah, I think the military training camp is definitely going to be a part of it. But then the rest of the map will be the Lost Woods and potentially it probably will in fact go around to Meadow Swamp, Lakes area.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is the location up in the top isn't actually named, but it'll just contain the whole forest, pretty much, with the Deku Tree in the center and then this tiny part down in the south where the military training camp is.
I have a feeling it won't function exactly the same in terms of like as you mentioned, the security system with like the magic fog. I think it might be like passing a test to prove you're worthy to get in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be trees are going to make it up as an actual sort of route, and that you can just run around and you won't get lost and end up back at the start.
Because I definitely think the Lost Woods is, if they changed any area's geography, the Lost Woods make the most sense because it's a magical area anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's the easiest to change because it's easy to just sort of move trees around and hide the fact that you've moved all the trees around. I don't think anyone's going to be so specific to go, this tree's not here in Breath of the Wild. This line of trees should be over there. Like, I think that this could definitely be a playable area. I feel like they'll probably make the most out of all the playable areas they can.
Right.
And this one they have a reason to go to this one, so I think it makes sense. On the last two areas under the hinted, these are also ones that sort of that makes sense to go from a story perspective. One we've seen, or at least I'm assuming we've seen it, is Hyrule Castle, with the scenes where Zelda looks like where she's crying and then looks like she's sealing the Calamity away. I would assume that's the final level of the game. Probably.
It would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense to have it. I think it would be weird not to, but I think we won't have it as a level until the end, when it's taken by the Calamity.
Same. I think it'll be the very final level. What I'm curious about is whether or not... two things, I guess. How much of Hyrule Castle can actually be explored? Because like you were saying earlier with the Gerudo Desert, they made it so that you could go into various buildings and stuff. Will you be able to do that in Hyrule Castle? Could you run around the whole building, or is that just unnecessarily complicated? So maybe they'll just have the path outside.
I think what's really neat about Hyrule Castle's layout in Breath of the Wild is you could take just the full path outside, and then there's also like the various ways in. But I almost feel like they could do the whole, not the entirety of the inside, but the main path, and then block the main path a few times, and then have you go inside and then out back towards the main path. Like, I think they can make a nice blend of the two without actually changing the map too much.
Yeah, I think that could work. Shut a few doors, open a few doors here and there, and you could potentially go to some key areas. Yeah. I think one thing I had a thought of is, depends how much of Hyrule Castle Town itself is playable. They could have all of it, because it's obviously sealed off, but there's Castle Town Prison, which is up in the northwest and has a path that basically just goes into the lake and vanishes. But we know that there is like an underground area and a prison section in Hyrule Castle itself. Yeah. So I almost wonder if there was intended to be a bridge there, which is now broken thanks to the Calamity. and maybe there's going to actually be like a pathway into the Hyrule Castle from the west that leads underground, and then you can go through the inside and come out on the other side of Hyrule Castle as another way in.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting Warriors map because of how layered it would be.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting to display on a map, and I think as a level 2, that's really going to be selling the 1-on-1000 kind of gameplay, because I don't think Zelda would have any sort of allied force army with her in this case. She would literally be alone, maybe have Impa with her.
Yeah, well, this is what my argument is for why I think characters like Purah and Robbie are definitely playable, because I just don't see them giving us a final mission with just Zelda and Impa supporting. It feels like there should be anyone who's not a champion supporting Zelda in her struggle up there, whether that be the king, if he's somehow still alive, whether it be Impa, Purah, Robbie, Hestu, any OCs they've thrown in there, Cass's master or whatever. Like,
maybe the little baby guardian.
Yeah, baby guardian, like something to support Zelda. They'll probably have some allied troops because they'll probably be like not all the castle guards manage to escape, and there are
they're the ones that are just there.
Yeah, some are hiding in Hyrule Town, some are hiding in like the dungeons, and you have to sort of free them to build up your forces as you make your way through. I could see them being the objectives on the way up.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
But yeah, Hyrule Castle seems like an obvious one for the last map, and we've seen cutscenes of it. The last map to talk about then is the Hatano Outpost, which is what I think it's called. It is just the Hatano region, basically, but we know that this must be playable because this is where Link dies.
Oh, Fort Hatano, yeah.
Fort Hatano, yeah, that's it.
Yep. Yeah, that's also going to be a tragic map.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be one where your main enemy is probably going to be Guardians.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a question of whether or not they just have you kill a certain amount of Guardians and then the game stops cutscenes you and then Link gets overrun, or if the scenario changes to be more like it's just an infinite amount of Guardians. Although, and then the game will eventually fade. The game will eventually fade out if you take too long, but if you also die in that area, then it also goes straight to the cutscene.
Yeah, so it's like a scripted loss, basically.
Yeah, scripted loss, but one where you can actually lose and get into it, as opposed to the scripted loss is where you win and then you cutscene to death.
Right.
For no reason. But that's got to be a mission. So my question for this one with Fort Hatano is Link obviously dies fairly close to, it's like Ash Swamp, Black Tree Plains or something.
Yep.
Where he dies, which is really close to Dueling Peaks. It's actually all the east side of Hatano in the Necluda region. So, sorry, the west side of Necluda. So is this going to just be one map? Will Kakariko Village be part of this map? Or is Hatano Fort going to actually be the centre of the map and you'll be able to go all the way to the east where Hatano Village actually is?
I think for that specific map where Link dies, I think Fort Hatano is going to be as far east as you can go. Because the whole point is holding the fort in that case. Yeah. To go beyond, like, nothing got beyond there. But I do think there will be other maps that play in Hatano that will let you go there. Especially if, if they play with the concept art of, Link having a family. Yeah. Maybe they're playable, who knows? Maybe they'll run out from Hatano Village all the way out to the fort to help with the fight. That's a long road, but...
it's a long... Well, I mean, in Hyrule Warriors, it might be a very short road, considering
that's
they squished the maps. But, yeah, it's... I'm curious to see, because I feel like it'd have to go west, because if it was just the east, because if it was just the west side of Hatano, it would actually be probably the smallest map in the game. And so unless it include the Dueling Peaks, and then a bit on the west side of the Dueling Peaks, or went north instead up to Benoru Stand and Kakariko Village, it's going to be a very small circular map.
It would be interesting if the larger map here also included the Nero Promenade and Mount Lanayru, like in the north.
Yeah, that would be an interesting
one. Because they are really close.
They are really close to one another. If the whole map actually includes Hatano and Lanayru thingy and Kakariko Village, and then you're right, for Link's Last Stand, they just make it the Hatano part. Maybe the Hatano and Kakariko part, like you have to go to Kakariko Village to get Sheikah to defend the fort or something like that. Because we know that the Sheikah were also fighting in that battle, because that's where they showed up to help Zelda carry Link's body.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's also probably going to be mapped. So those are all the ones that are confirmed or hinted at. It seems. We've already mentioned a couple of possible ones there that they could potentially use Farron Woods because it would have to be the only location in the Farron area with the spring, unless they decide to turn that one village I never remember into
Lordland Village,
yeah, like have a beach map. I don't know why they would, but they could potentially have something down there. And also with the Farron area, I'm curious how far into Farron grasslands they would go. Because the Farron grasslands are more flat and would make for a more realistic map, I suppose. But it's also still just kind of like Hyrule Field, a bit plain. Whereas Farron Woods is where the Spring of Courage is, where the dragon is, where all that action is. But how far into the grasslands will it go with Lake Hylia, or will it just cover the whole forest instead, where you go to Lake Floria and the Floria Bridge? I'm wondering how much Farron would actually cover if
I feel like it would stop around looking at the map. In case it hasn't been obvious in this entire discussion, we both have the actual map, but we haven't memorized these areas. That would be insane.
I'm Breath of the Wild master.
You would probably go as far east as Sarjan Woods, or as far south as Martha's Landing.
Yeah. I was thinking that as well.
I think they would want to have a section just to be silly for the Lake of the Horse God and Melania. I think they would want to do something with that just to be silly.
Melania Spring. Yeah, that's because there's the big horse area, Horse God Bridge, and Furrow Plains and stuff like that. I could see that. I could see that being a map far southeast Martha's Landing, southwest part being
but the main
Lake.
focus would be to get up the Dracozo River
Lake.
up to the Spring of Courage.
Yeah, I think so as well.
And then, you can have all the Zelda fanatics go crazy over Zonai ruins.
As they do. So so I think that's very likely to be a map. I assume you think the same as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Deep Akala we talked about, which we said could either be part of the Akala Highlands or its own thing, but Spring of Power is there, so it feels likely to be in the game in some form. Tabantha Tundra and Hebra Mountains is one of those weird ones where there's nothing really up there to go to.
But it makes sense to have it because it was not left out.
Just to have something, because otherwise, it's a really odd section of the map with nothing in it.
Maybe it's just further proving stuff to Rivali of tenacity and courage and whatnot.
Yeah,
skill.
And then there's lastly the Gerudo Canyon Pass, which we talked about briefly as just being a weird S shape, and then the Gerudo Highlands, which is the other snowy area in the game. Now, it doesn't seem like the desert path, like the Gerudo Desert map, goes all the way up to the Highlands, because if we assume the north of it is the Yiga village, then it will cover the very south of the Highlands, because there's that pathway up behind the Yiga clan base, and then they'll probably just have it loop round. They think they just have it loop round back into the desert, making up a pathway between the two. But I wonder if you'd go higher into the Gerudo Highlands. I'm not actually sure, now that I'm actually looking at the map and considering the sizes of maps usually, I don't necessarily think it's big enough to have its own map.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, so potentially Gerudo Highlands won't be playable, and won't be a playable area. And I don't think the Gerudo Canyon Pass is a playable area for the sole reason that all it does is connect Central Hyrule and Gerudo Desert. And we know from the Treehouse footage that, unlike Hyrule Ridge, where they have to have a fight to get to the lab, there is nothing in Gerudo Canyon Pass. There isn't a map location there. So presumably it's a pretty straightforward walk for Link, Zelda, and Impa to get to the desert.
Yep, exactly.
Those are all the areas I picked out anyway that could be potential maps. Is there anywhere on here, Triss, that you think that hasn't been mentioned that could potentially work as a map?
We definitely hit upon all the main ones. I do think Lake Hylia could end up being part of something near the Great Plateau or the Farron Grasslands. I think it'd be weird to leave Lake Hylia out since that's such an iconic area in Zelda. Sure, it's not used that much in Breath of the Wild, but I think we will also get a map in the Lanayru wetlands, specifically Gaponga Village, because that's like a whole village that's kind of spread out. And I know other people have covered the fact that for Daruk and Mipha to get to their divine beast from where they originally were, they would have to cross through there.
That's true.
And that village is in ruins in Breath of the Wild, so it would be interesting to have like a defense mission there or something. Or it's a weird area because I don't think they would really have too much else around it. It would probably be the very tail end of the whole Zora's River area.
Yeah,
but
the Inogo Bridge section, basically.
But I do think it would be interesting to have, because there's a lot of little islands there, and it might make for an interesting scenario, because it's an area a lot of people actually kind of overlook in Zelda, but it's one of the larger establishments.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of push it in with the Zora's Domain area, because most people will go through the village ruins to get to the mouth of the river towards Zora's Domain. And then do that whole section where it's raining non-stop. So like everyone goes through there, but I think because it's basically just a big swamp with an annoying guardian in there and a shrine, anyone remembers it as either as a part of Zora's Domain or for Linebeck Island.
Right. Because, the iconic name.
Yes, exactly. But no, I mean, I don't think it's any stranger than Hyrule Ridge as a location.
Yeah, that's true.
So I could see that. There's also a garrison there, more garrison, so that they could potentially be a mission, Nero Wetlands.
The only other one that came to mind is there is an area in Central Hyrule, I'm trying to find it, to the west of the Sacred Grounds and kind of south a bit, there's the Sage Temple ruins. And that looks really old. But I don't know if that's something we'll see ruined in this game, or if it's something that's already ruined by the time Breath of the Wild, because it looks even older in terms of ruins.
Oh yeah,
but I'm really curious if that'll next to the Giant's Forest. I'm really curious to see if that'll actually tie into anything though.
Yeah, it's a weird one because that's. Sorry, say that again?
I'll say, because we do go near it when we go to like Hyrule Garrison and such, but it wouldn't be like a whole separate map, but I'm curious if that'll connect to anything, because that's to me, that's one of the more interesting ruins in Zelda, in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's in a weird spot though, because it's like south of Preach of Demise, Hyrule Ridge, west of Hyrule Field. Like, what if it was in the map? If it was in the thing in the map, I feel like it would almost have to connect to Mount Daphne, Gleeok Bridge, and Satori Mountain just to have it actually big enough, because they can't just do Giant's Forest and the Temple Ruins.
Well, yeah. I figured it would connect to like the Hyrule Field or something, but I'm mostly going into the. I do wonder if we'll see a lot of explanation, so to say, for the various ruins found in Breath of the Wild, or if we'll find many of them are already in ruin.
It could be possible that this is where the Colosseum ruins are, because this is one thing I found really strange. The Colosseum is such a big... It's not like a major location, but it's one of the more memorable side locations in the game. Yeah. And it doesn't appear to be in the Hyrule Field map. And I don't think it would be in the Great Plateau map. No. So, does that mean it's just not going to actually be in this game at all?
Which would be really weird.
Yeah, it seems like a significant location for, or at least something you would have in a Warriors game, so to not have it appear at all is an odd one. Right. But, I mean, at the same time, it could do, because there's no reason to just have an area just to have the area, I suppose. And if there's no reason for them to ever go there to have a fight, like, unless they make it some sort of weird point where Rivali, and like how we were saying with the Lanayru Wetlands, where Daruk and Mipha have to go there to get up to their specific areas, we know that Urbosa would have to pass down there. Maybe Rivali took a wrong turn and is also somehow down there and is going to work his way north instead of going through Hyrule Field with Link and Zelda. Although he could fly home, so I suppose he doesn't actually need to have a fight anywhere.
I think, ultimately, when it comes to the areas, as we learned with Hyrule Ridge, I think they'll toss in some random unexpected ones. Not random, but I think they'll end up tossing in some unexpected ones that, upon seeing why we're fighting there, they'll make a lot more sense.
like maybe the Forgotten Temple.
Yeah, I would be really I would actually be really interested if they ended up doing that. But that's definitely one that would totally still be in ruins.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that one is old.
Yeah, we'll just have to see when the game comes out. But this is actually quite a lot of levels. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we just take the ones that are confirmed and hinted at, that's a whole 12 maps to already go in. And then we've given suggestions for at least 7 more. I can't remember how many maps there were in the first Hyrule Warriors.
I'm going to check that right now so we can have it set in here.
Yeah, I don't feel like there was as many as there seems to be in this one.
Looks like there's about 18.
Okay, so there's about 18 maps. So actually it does match up with this one. I mean, there might even be less maps in this one. Mm-hmm. Legends added in more maps, didn't it, into the first Hyrule Warriors? So
yeah, well, it only added 2. Well, it added variants, I guess. They didn't really change anything except the lighting.
Okay, fair enough.
the variants didn't change anything except just the time of day the battle took place at. But otherwise, the only 2 levels that added were the Su Wind Waker ones in Legends.
Yeah. Okay. All right then.
Yeah.
Cool. So Legends, I actually never played. I was like, I'm not doing another Hyrule Warriors all this time.
I've sunk too much time into all of them.
But all right. So yeah, potentially if they have all of the ones confirmed, hinted, and possible ones that would match that, could potentially be less how there might be less characters in this game. There's potentially less locations as well. Mm-hmm. Gonna be curious to see what we get in the final product. And also, I mean, just something I just suddenly thought of. Do we think that all the side stuff then, all these extra scenarios that appeared on the map, is this going to replace the adventure mode, essentially?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Especially the one that they showed off, where it's Link with training with the two-handed weapon. That's basically the same thing as an adventure mode map. These are the side missions. I don't think we'll have any bonus modes. It'll be these.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that's the same as well, which makes me just wonder how many of them we're going to actually have. Mm-hmm. And whether or not they'd be able to add any more, or would they just have, like, map 2, and you go on here and it's just full of side missions everywhere instead, but the same map. I also wonder if I know they said some unlock conditions were, like, making a training dummy or something like that.
Yep.
So I wonder if that's how all the materials are going to be used, crafting stuff, as opposed to what it was in the original Hyrule Warriors, where you had to find, like, a special bomb item, and then blow up a special rock to unlock the mission for that area.
Maybe. We'll have to see, and thankfully we don't have too much longer to wait.
That's true, we don't have too much longer to wait. So I think we'll wrap up here then, because we've been talking for a good hour plus about everything again. There's just a lot to talk about, and we're both really excited for it.
Oh yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Tris, for joining me to gush about this game again.
Yeah, no, as rather obvious from this, I'm happy to gush about this game too.
And thank everybody for listening to us gush about this game. Let us know if there are any areas you would like to see in Breath of the Wild, in Age of Calamity. Let us know if there's any areas you'd like to see in Age of Calamity. If you like the sort of ideas we were throwing about for how some of these levels might go, or if you've got your own ideas on how some of the layouts might be, let us know as well in the comments. Flashing on screen right now will be all of our patrons, the $5 up tier. If you want to know how you could join that lovely list, there is a link down in the description below, and there'll probably be something on the end screen as well. As always, like, subscribe, hit the bell, help us survive the battle against the YouTube calamity. And always remember to return to the source.